Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Northern Lights, why winter 2025 will be an epic season. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Eleanor Edye. I'm your host, Rob Bess. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Take it away, Eleanor.
Hi, everybody, and thanks, Rob. And thanks to all of you for joining us here today. As Rob said, today we're here to talk about the Northern Lights 2025 season, and specifically what there is to be super excited about for this season to come. Like Rob said, my name's Eleanor. I'm one of our Canadian expedition leaders, so I do a lot of our guiding up in the Churchill region where we run our Northern Lights trips. As well as some other things elsewhere in the world as well. So for the next hour or so, we'll take you through some of the highlights for this season to come, as well as leaving time for some questions. And at my end, I'm running things a little bit differently. Just wanted to give everybody a word of warning. I have a small parrot in my house. He refused to go back in his cage just now, and he was screaming, so he's currently singing to himself in the mirror. This just means that we may be visited by a parrot midway through this presentation. So don't be startled if there's suddenly a bird on my shoulder. So with that, let's move forward and talk about this season. So Natural Habitat offers Northern Lights trips based in Churchill, Manitoba. Now, this is not the only place in the world that you might be able to see Northern Lights. Certainly if you've, for example, looked at our Iceland programs and some of our kind of later summer Alaska programs, there are those other places where you might get lucky, you might see Northern Lights, but we're here today to talk about kind of the best known, our flagship Northern Lights trip that goes to Churchill, Manitoba, Canada, on the shores of Hudson Bay. The trip is called Northern Lights and Arctic Exploration. And that's really the theme of the trip itself, right? Is to get out and explore everything that the subarctic has to offer. And then each night up north, we visit a new location to wait and watch for those Northern Lights. The trip starts and finishes in Winnipeg, Manitoba. It goes to Churchill. We have daytime activities as well as nighttime viewing opportunities. So I want to break this down and go through all the things that make this an amazing trip, as well as why 2025 in particular is set up to be a year that's going to be one for the books. So let's just move forward and talk about where this trip goes. This is Canada that you're looking at here, and there's two arrows on this map. The trip begins in Winnipeg, Manitoba, kind of just north of North Dakota there. And it is a location with an international airport. It's a relatively large place. It's got around 700,000 people. So it's a great place to stage ourselves and get ready to go up north. So you arrive, you're met by our amazing team. You're transferred to a hotel in Winnipeg for a welcome dinner, as well as some gear pickup, which I'll talk about in a bit. And then after a night in Winnipeg, you take a private flight to Churchill where you're going to spend 4 nights. And like I was saying earlier, you've probably heard about other popular places to view the Northern Lights, whether it's Iceland, whether it's Yellowknife, or up in Alaska. Or maybe you're flying into Churchill and you're looking out the window and you just feel like you've reached the end of the world and you're wondering why we chose Churchill. Well, to understand why we've chosen Churchill as this location for these flagship Lights trips, there's a few things that we want to talk about, right? We want to talk about how aurora happens, so where does it come from? And then to talk about the weather patterns of Churchill, both the good and the bad here. So I'm going to give you a really brief summary of where the Northern Lights ultimately come from. If you're traveling with us on a trip, you're going to be hearing a lot more about this, but I'm going to give you the 90-second summary here. Essentially, aurora activity is dependent entirely not on the weather of the Earth, so the weather of the Earth affects our ability to see things, but on space weather. So things that affect our atmosphere, but that are coming from outside the atmosphere from space, in particular coming from the sun. So this is obviously an infographic that's been really smushed together. Our planet is not that close to the sun, but the sun has a constant but variable stream of charged particles that comes out called the solar wind. This solar wind is made up of a very, not dense at all material, but it's got these charged particles that move through space coming outwards from the sun. They pass through space relatively unhindered until they impact the magnetic field of Earth. Once the magnetic field of Earth and the magnetic field of the solar winds meet, the charged particles are then funneled up and down towards the poles of our planet, where they interact with our atmosphere. So in this next one here, you can really see that funneling. So you've got the you got the solar wind coming out from the sun. They carry a magnetic field inherent in them, and magnetic fields, if you've ever tried to smush two magnets together, they either pull each other in or they push each other away. So what those magnetic field interactions will do is pull that energy, those high energy particles down in towards our planet. But they don't come into our atmosphere randomly. They follow those magnetic lines down towards our atmosphere. And they end up in two very distinct locations, in areas called the auroral ovals. And auroral oval describes a zone that's located around both the north geomagnetic pole and the south geomagnetic pole, where aurora activity is most likely. So here's our northern auroral oval. So this is a place where aurora is seen most often because basically every little bit of charged particles that are coming from the sun are going to end up in this zone. The aurora here is so regular that not having aurora is more unusual than having it. And you can see there a little star that I put on Churchill, and that it is directly underneath that auroral oval. So in Churchill, if we stripped away the clouds, there would be enough energy coming in from these particles for visible aurora, so visible to the human eye over 300 nights a year. So that is our first reason why Churchill is a fantastic place. If you look at this auroral oval, you can see that all of the other locations that you hear about being really good for northern lights viewing are kind of roughly under that oval as well, but Churchill sits directly underneath it. Now, the other part that makes Churchill really exceptional for aurora viewing is the weather. And we don't all have to look like this, but Churchill is known in the winter for its very cold and some snow that is present on the land. So this is a guest from one of our wonderful trips from last year. This is not the wind blowing snow in his face. This was his sibling taking on, and embracing the Canadian tradition of putting snow in your brother's face and down his jacket. A very exceptional experience and not to be repeated very often, but something to be enjoyed as a special event. But the weather is definitely something we get asked about a lot. What can I expect in terms of being comfortable, and what does the weather have to do with the aurora itself? So if we look at the temperatures, remember I said the trip starts in Winnipeg. That's where you fly into and where you're met and have a welcome dinner. Our trips run January, February, and March. And if you look at these temperatures, these are all in Fahrenheit. Not looking so bad, right? Average highs of 7, 14, and 27 running into the spring there. But lows of -13, -9, and then +5. So definitely on the chillier side for some, and not too much precipitation. We like to say in Winnipeg that it's a dry cold. But if you go up to Churchill, you're looking at even less precipitation and even colder temperatures. And I am here to say that yes, Churchill is cold. These are averages, meaning that sometimes it's warmer than what you're seeing here, and sometimes it's colder than what you're seeing here as well. The wind plays a big part in our comfort, and we do regularly get night temperatures where it feels like -45 or colder due to the combination of air temperatures being quite low as well as a wind being present. But what this means is that when we have these super cold temperatures, that there isn't much moisture able to be carried in the air. And we're going to talk about moisture in a second. I found this graph online yesterday and I had to put this up because I find it so funny. It shows you the average temperature at any given time of year, and Churchill goes from cool in the summer to cold to very cold to freezing to frigid. So we are there at the time when it is very cold or freezing or frigid, mostly the freezing and frigid temperatures. Again, these are averages as well. We do sometimes get into the warm territory, but overall you can expect cold temperatures. And what those cold temperatures do, as I was alluding to earlier, is reduce the amount of moisture that's held in the air. So there's actually a really cool system that you can use in North America. It's called an astronomical forecast. And your astronomical forecast doesn't just look at the clouds, it looks specifically at how the clouds will affect your ability to view sky phenomena in the winter, at night. This one here that I pulled up is for those January, February, and March months, and it looks at those averages again. And you can see on the right-hand side, those are clear through to more clear. On the left-hand side are our cloudy forecasts. So we have an expected forecast of clear or mostly clear half the time, partly or mostly cloudy about another quarter of the time, and then cloudy about a quarter of the time. That is quite good to have, most of your nights having the ability to see the sky and the ability to see what's happening in the sky. And this particular forecast is taken from the area just outside the town of Churchill. It is a really important forecast. It's what I look at every day as a guide. It's what all my colleagues look at as well, because it's what ultimately tells you what's going to be visible. And this, just to understand as well, we're not just talking about clouds, we're talking about things like ice crystals that might get in the way of viewing. They even look at smoke forecasts when there is smoke. So this does show you that you've got a very, very good chance of having a lot of clear nights when visiting Churchill. The day length is important as well, right? We'll talk in a minute about viewing the aurora and what that's like, but we probably know that you need to have darkness to be able to view the northern lights. And this infographic shows you the length of night and the length of day for each day of the year. And on the left-hand side, we have January, February, March, and then you can see that little break. That is where we have daylight savings time starting, and then you have the other breakdown towards the fall when daylight savings time ends and everything jumps by an hour. But that dark color you can see represents true night, and then the less dark colors represent the different levels of twilight. All this is to say that in January, you're going to have more darkness than you will in March, but January, February, and March all have very long nights. And in January, the sun will probably rise around 8 to 9 o'clock in the morning and set around 4:30 to 5:30 in the evening. So very long periods of darkness in which we can do that viewing. So that is why Churchill. We go there because it places us directly underneath the auroral oval, that even on a night without a whole lot of solar activity, because we're getting all those particles being funneled into that area, we have activity the vast majority of nights in that area. And because those temperatures and those very cold temperatures in particular in the winter allow us to have those clear, dark skies and long, dark nights. In terms of why this year, why 2025 is going to be a good year, well, I should say that in Churchill, every year is a good year. I've been guiding in Churchill for many years now, and I've never experienced a bad year for Northern Lights, but you may be hearing about it more lately, or perhaps you've even seen Northern Lights in areas that you didn't expect to see them. There was a really big solar storm, for example, back in May, where a lot of people who hadn't, normally had the chance to see Northern Lights where they live, got that one night chance. And this is because we're coming to a point in time that's known as peak solar cycle, also called peak sunspot cycle. And this is a very pronounced 11-year cycle where the amount of activity in the sun changes over time. It's very set. It always goes over that 11-year cycle. And during that time, the sun goes from periods of very low activity with a low number of sunspots, less solar wind, fewer particles coming off of the sun, to periods like right now where we are nearly at or at the maximum, where we have a lot of sunspots, a lot of activity, a lot of mass being ejected from the sun. And the more mass you get, typically the more aurora you get, and especially the wider that aurora zone gets, which is why people in the more southerly areas are seeing it this year sometimes as well. So you can see here, if you can, that we're kind of right now in 2024. We have a very high number of sunspots. We are not sure exactly where the peak of this solar cycle is going to be, but it was estimated between 2024 and 2026. And we are now thinking that likely it is nearing its peak right now. So it will be high for a while as it starts to decline again. And those sunspots will continue to be quite present. So this is why this year in particular is going to be a really interesting one for Northern Lights viewing in lots of locations, but especially in what we know to be a wonderful place of Churchill. So that is kind of our brief summary as to why Churchill and why this year. And now I want to talk about the trip itself and what you can expect on a Northern Lights adventure with natural habitat. So to start with this, I want to start us off right at the beginning of a trip, because that is where you're going to meet your NatHab representative. So this is the airport in Winnipeg. Huge, right? I said it's a large city, but it's still a small, large city. No matter which itinerary you're flying in on, we are going to meet you here at the airport. We offer both a standard regular itinerary as well as a photo itinerary, and I'll talk a little bit about the differences between the two of them, but they do offer the same inclusions, the same sequence of events. Both of these trips start in Winnipeg, go to Churchill. It's just how we focus our time and our attention when we're in Churchill is the main difference between those two types of trips. So you arrive into Winnipeg, you're going to see somebody like me wearing a NatHab logo. We're going to pick you up, grab your luggage, and get you to the wonderful Fort Garry Hotel in downtown Winnipeg. Once you've arrived at the hotel, we're going to let you know when and where that you can pick up your gear. And gear, as we've talked about the temperatures, you can see how important that gear is going to be, right? So we are that full service company. We want you to be warm and comfortable and safe when you're up in Churchill. And you are going to do part of that by getting your gear while you're in Winnipeg. And not just warm and safe and comfortable, we want you enjoying the cold. I am from Manitoba. I grew up with cold temperatures. I spend my winters in Churchill. And I admit that sometimes there are nights where I think, okay, it's a little chilly right now, but most of the time we say there's no bad weather, there's only bad gear. So we want you in the good gear. We want you enjoying your time outside. There is such a satisfaction as well as a feeling of empowerment when you realize you haven't just survived -40. You enjoyed it and you want to go out there and do it again. So we have a bunch of loaner gear that we are going to set you up with. Basically everything you can see in this image here, but that includes winter boots. We have some very heavy duty winter boots that is designed for life in the north. You're going to get a parka with a hood. You're going to get insulated snow pants. You are also going to get a mid layer of a nice heavy fleece. Leather mittens, and they look like really basic mittens, but they are the gold standard for mittens that we use all through the north. That they are the kind that you want to use. You're going to get a fleece hat, a fleece net gaiter, a balaclava, and we will have a supply of hand and foot warmers available as well. So all of this, you're going to show up at our gear room and we're going to kit you out and make sure that you're wearing things that fit you, that are comfortable, as comfortable as you can be when you're not used to wearing all these layers, but you will get used to it. And then that's going to be kind of how we welcome you to Winnipeg. If you arrive early, if you want to fly in a day or two early and you want to go explore the city, you're always welcome to pick up this gear early so you can have it to enjoy and feel warm and safe during your time in Winnipeg as well. When you sign up to your trip, we're also going to send you a full suggested packing list because there's definitely some other items besides this that you'll want to make sure you bring with you. But we want to make sure that we're taking care of all those big, bulky items that you probably never want to use in your normal life, right? Our folks, our guests are always really happy to pick them up, really happy to use them, and then usually really happy to hand them back when the trip is done, because that way you never need to take them home to the desert or wherever else you live. So you'll pick up your gear. That evening you're going to meet your expedition leader, so somebody like myself who's going to travel with you to Churchill and teach you all about these wonderful things. You're going to meet the rest of your group, and we're going to have a lovely welcome dinner in Winnipeg. The next day we're going to be off to Churchill on a private charter flight. This is a wonderful service. I always feel so lucky to be able to, skip the main airport and just go to the charter terminal and load on, and it's so fast and easy. We typically take this type of plane that you can see here. This is an ATR 72. Sometimes we'll use a different plane depending on the size of the groups heading up, because there will be more than one group on that plane heading up to Churchill at the same time as you. We like to do things at the same time so we can be really efficient with our use of planes. The flight itself is about 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on the winds, to take you up to Churchill, and there is a bathroom on board. Once you reach Churchill, again, you're going to be traveling with your expedition leader, somebody like myself. And when we get there, we're going to meet another really important person on the ground who's going to be our bus driver while we're in Churchill. So each group that goes to Churchill is going to be assigned one particular bus, and that bus driver are going to be with us for all of our time in Churchill. This is one of the buses that we typically take. And then on one occasion as well, you're going to get a chance to go on a much bigger bus. This is called a snow coach, and this snow coach will take us out for an activity into the forest and down a frozen river. So you can probably tell here it's quite a bit larger than a standard bus on much bigger tires, and that will be an activity that each group gets to do. In Churchill, each group is going to be housed at a hotel in town. There are a number of hotels that we use. They're all kind of right in the middle of town. It's a very small town of about 900 people, and all of the hotels we use have the same level of service. So you're going to have your things in here. You're going to be in that same room for 4 nights, and that's going to be your home base to, stage all your gear and get everything ready to head out for all of our activities. While you're in Churchill as well, and on the entirety of our trip, all meals are included with our trip. That might be anything from a late breakfast before starting your day, your lunches, your dinners, and we have, we often have snacks available as well. Even though we're in a very remote northern community, we can accommodate all standard dietary restrictions as long as we have advance notice of those restrictions. It is a fly-in only community with a train once a week, so we just want to make sure that we have all the supplies that we need to make sure you can, you know, safely and enjoy your meals while you're there. So that's our our hotels and our meals. That's great. It's good to know that we're going to give a roof over your head and get you something to eat. But let's talk about the fun stuff and what you're actually going to be doing while you're up there. Even though it is a Northern Lights tour, remember we're talking Northern Lights and Arctic exploration. So our evenings are certainly focused on Northern Lights opportunities to view, but that doesn't mean that we're not doing anything during the day as well. I said that I wanted us outside and thriving and enjoying the cold, and that is what we're going to do. We're going to do activities like snowshoeing in the forest. If you've never tried snowshoeing before, don't be intimidated. I like to tell all my groups that if you can walk, you can snowshoe. It's just a little bit of a learning curve about how to put your feet down a little bit differently. We have a number of indoor activities as well that we will do, things like visiting a local museum that's focused on Inuit art and culture. We'll have fun in the snow. Perhaps we'll build a snow shelter and get to feel what it's like to feel like a pika or another animal that lives underneath the snow, to what that can do to keep us safe. We're going to have local presenters that we get to visit with as well. So these are folks who live right in Churchill who are really welcoming and excited to talk to us, just like we're excited to talk to them, and bring their perspective about their lives and their community for our group. And we're also going to meet probably the most popular people in town are the dogs. So all of our trips do include dog sledding as well. It is a short experience, and we make sure that it is that length because, again, with the cold and the wind, we have to make sure that you're safe on the sleds. But it's about a 15-minute experience on the sleds, as well as this amazing experience with the dog musher, who's going to teach us all about dog mushing and all about his culture and all these things that you never thought you would ever know about dog mushing is going to be coming your way. One of the critical daytime activities that I haven't pictured here, but is very important, is nap time. While we keep ourselves busy during the day, we also try to carve out as much as we can some downtime during the day so that you are able to rest, or maybe pull photos off your camera, or call home, or go for a walk, or however you would like to refresh yourself for the evening to come. Because the evenings are certainly we have so many highlights of the trip, and it's hard to say the evenings are the highlight because everything is the highlights. But the evenings are, of course, when the Northern Lights may be seen. We do have multiple viewing locations that we do use, and each trip will visit a different location each night. I'm going to show you some of the locations that we visit. Not every trip is going to visit every single location because we have more locations than we have nights in town, but you will get to see this variety of them during your trip. While they are all different, they all have a warm indoor space and they all have a bathroom. Some of the viewing locations offer the ability to stay inside and watch through windows or through a dome on the roof. And with some of those locations, you get to use that gear that you borrowed and go outside to see with your eyes. Because through years of experience, all of us guides can say that, while it's lovely to have those windows inside, I've never had a trip where you don't see the lights and immediately people put on their jackets and go outside. Just having that 1 degree of connection between you and the lights and being able to go outside and have that experience in the outdoors is really what most people prefer. So this is one of our viewing locations here. You can see it's a yurt with a lovely deck around it in the middle of the forest. This next, this next image here you can see is a little bit dark because the inside of the structure, we had all the lights off so we could be viewing the northern lights. This is our Aurora pod. So it looks a little bit like a train car, and it's got windows on top and windows on the side. So this is one that you can sit inside and do viewing. Though, like I said, when I look at this image, there's nobody inside because everybody goes outside to view the lights, because that's really where you have that connection. This is a different location that we have here, and you can see this is actually a geodesic dome that has a window on the side here. We have a fire inside, we have chairs, we've got blankets. It's lovely and warm, and you do get some view out through the windows, but again, in most cases, we want to step outside to do that viewing anyway. And each of these locations gives you a different experience inside as well as a different experience outside. So we have, we have different foregrounds if you're interested in photography. We have different things to take pictures of, the different things that are highlighted in the different locations. So if you wanted, for example, a picture of trees with your aurora, some of our locations have trees close by, some do not. So we'll have that variety of locations to give you a variety of ways to see. And each person prefers a different location, so you'll get lots of different places to see while you're on your trip. This one here is our Aurora Dome, so you can see that there's a building below, and then just on top there's two half-sphere domes where we can fit about 7 or 8 people inside to view through that dome at the lights there. And then this is an area especially beloved for photography. This is actually the location of the dog mushing that we do at Wapusk Adventures. And on nights with Aurora, we put a little light inside the teepee, and you can get a great photo of the northern lights and a teepee, and possibly with the dogs, possibly with, the cabin. So again, lots of different viewpoints, lots of different things to get excited about, and every location is going to offer that different experience to enjoy. One thing I did want to take this opportunity to talk about is how you, as a human, are going to perceive those northern lights and what to expect. So this is this image here. You can see it's the same image on the left and right hand side, but it's meant to be on the right hand side how our eyes perceive the light, and then on the left hand side how your camera perceives the light. So I mentioned before, I've been leading these trips a very long time. I've been very, very lucky to have so many wonderful aurora shows, and I've gotten to see all of the guests on these trips experience lights kind of through their own eyes. How you see the lights will always be different than how your camera sees the lights. And so when you see images of very vibrant northern lights, these are images that you can capture yourself with your smartphone or with your camera, but your eyes are never going to have the same experience. The short answer as to why this happens is that the northern lights are a very faint light phenomenon. So we need complete darkness to see it, because if it's not dark, we can't see the lights. And when we are in complete darkness, human eyes perceive faint light best with certain cells in our eyes called rods. And rods see in degrees of light and dark. They don't see colors, which is why if you wake up at night and go to walk to the bathroom, everything appears to be in black and white. This applies to the northern lights as well. Colors can be seen with the naked eye, but the predominant color you're going to get is just either a pale green or just the sensation of brightness. And colors appear faint, or they might be seen with the corner of your eyes. And there are some people whose eyes are better than others at seeing these lights. My eyes, for example, I very, very rarely see color. I'm regularly with people who say wow, look at the pink in there, or look at the green in there. And I just go, it's really pretty and I'm really enjoying myself, but I don't see those colors because we all have different eyes and our eyes are just individual to each person. Your camera, though, your camera is going to see those colors very differently because your camera is not limited by biology. It is able to perceive those colors even when they're faint. So I'm going to talk about cameras in a second, but cameras are actually a really interesting way that we can have different experiences with the same phenomenon. So I always advise people to, put the camera down, take a look, enjoy it with your eyes because it is fantastic. Uh, I've never had people be disappointed by these shows when they realize that they're not going to see as much color as they do in the photos. And then you hold up your phone and you snap a photo and you're like, wow, it's pink. Why don't my eyes see pink? And it's for this exact reason. It's just the way our eyes work compared to the way cameras work. Still wonderful, still completely amazing, and just this amazing natural phenomenon, but different between your eyes and your camera. In a lot of cases, smartphones are going to be an amazing tool for photography on these trips. Whether you're on a regular tour or whether you're on a photo tour. I was out for a walk with my group one night in the forest and the aurora appeared and I held up my phone and I snapped a photo and it looked like this. And that's through absolutely no preparation on my part at all. And this is a 2-year-old Samsung, for the record, to kind of show you even what an older phone at this point can do. And they're often easier to work with than our bigger cameras as well. For those of you who are interested in bringing up a DSLR camera and trying your hand at aurora photography, it's also really fun. We do have challenges with the camera in the cold weather, but we'll be able, as your expedition leader, as your guides, to help you through that and talk you through kind of how to manage cameras in the cold. And whether you're on a photo trip or whether you're on a regular trip, our guides will be able to provide that level of instruction to keep your camera safe and to make sure that you're getting the experience that you want. If you're on a regular trip, you can, of course, bring your camera with you. And if you're on a photography trip, we're going to be doing in the evenings and overnight those specialized ways of trying to set up those shots, to take different images, to really work on it with our cameras to get that photo that we're looking for. But no matter which trip that you're on, those cameras will have their quirks in the cold and we'll be able to help you through that for sure. The main quirk that both your DSLR or your smartphone will have in the cold is that the batteries will die quickly. So at -40, batteries do not last very long, whether that's in your smartphone or whether it's in your camera. So we will talk about ways to swap out batteries, to warm things back up, and to do some recharging. So we'll be able to help you through those particular challenges. Now, we have snowshoeing, we have dog mushing, we have northern lights, we have all this northern adventuring that we're going to be doing. We have our town-based activities, visits to the museum, visits with local presenters. What about other natural things that we might see? Well, northern lights are certainly the focus. If you travel to Churchill at other times of year, you might know Churchill as a destination for polar bears or a destination for beluga whales or for migratory birds. In the winter, the wildlife is much fewer and a little bit far between, but it doesn't mean that everything has gone to ground. There are animals that we can see in the winter. For example, the Arctic hare or the snowshoe hare as well is sometimes seen. The Arctic hare can often just be spotted right in town, especially on sunny days where it likes to sit in the sun and collect that solar energy for itself. There are a couple of birds that remain in Churchill through the winter. This is, of course, a raven, and ravens are really powerful birds. They really speak to a lot of things and to a lot of people. They're very big in Churchill. They are some of the biggest ravens that are found anywhere in the world. And they're they're really quite special, and we will have an opportunity, I'm sure, to see them because they do spend time in town as well as time outside town in the winter. A smaller but also special bird that we see in the forest is called the Canada jay or the gray jay. This bird belongs to the same family, right, as the blue jays, the other corvidae, but is active through the winter and is a little cheeky. He's often a favorite of a lot of visitors because they do like to come over and say hello. And these are willow ptarmigan in their winter coat. You can imagine how challenging these are to spot in the winter when you've got snow all over and these white birds that are trying to hide and roost in the snow. But we do sometimes get lucky and spot them as well. And especially on this lovely day with the sun on them was a great day to take a photo of these very cute, very round birds. We do sometimes see foxes, both red foxes and Arctic foxes. And once in a while, we have encountered a moose. And even less likely, but still possible, we've seen some polar bear tracks in the winter when polar bears are active and moving around. I've never personally seen a polar bear at this time of year, but they are still present in the region, and we do still take some safety precautions around polar bears. So I want to hand things back over to Rob for some questions, because I know there's always a lot of questions with our presentations like this when we're talking about trips. If you've got specific questions about things that you want to ask, I'm happy to answer those. And while we do that, I'll have just a few lovely photos playing in the background.
Okay, thank you, Eleanor. Now, before we start with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your GoToWebinar control panel. And if you're interested in traveling to see an aurora with NatHab, you can visit our website at nathab.com for trip details or give us a call at 800-543 8917 to speak with an adventure specialist. All right, let's dive into some of these questions. Okay, so for our guests that wear glasses, will we have an issue with them fogging or freezing up? Would goggles help maybe? Or is there anything you could give us a hint that would help us with this?
Oh, I'll do better than give you a hint, because what I'm going to tell you is born through my learning through decades of winter activity, both in Churchill and across Manitoba as a glasses wearer. So here we go. Here's my advice. The first and best thing you can do is to get contacts. Um, I prefer glasses. I'm not a big fan of contacts. I don't like to wear them if I don't have to. But when I travel to Churchill in the winter, if I want to be able to see properly without any risk of fogging, the only true answer to that is contact lenses. Now, there are things that we can do. Okay, so say you're somebody who can't wear contacts for some reason, there's a few other options. Things that I have tried include anti-fog wipes. They actually do work relatively well. That's something that I've started doing on days where my eyes just don't want to wear contacts anymore. So you can go onto Amazon or go to your local glasses store, something like that, and get some anti-fog wipes for your glasses. And what I found is that they will fog up less often, and then when you go into the warmth, they actually just ice right over. But they don't fog. And when you're going into the warmth, it doesn't matter as much anyway, because you can just take them off and let them defrost. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Goggles are another option as well. I have used those too. Goggles are not foolproof, and there's no way to make them last forever. When we're outside at -30 or -40, the main thing that's going to make your goggles freeze up is if you're wearing that that fleece buff, and you pull the fleece buff all the way up to the level of your goggles, that warm air that you're exhaling is going to come up and hit your glasses or your goggles or whatever else you've got over your eyes. And so even with the goggles will freeze up, glasses will frost up. You'll still have that happening at those temperatures. So do bring goggles because they do help for some length of time. When they freeze up, we can use those anti-fog wipes on them as well. And then the other thing that I do, again, if I'm choosing to wear glasses or my eyes are just tired of wearing contacts, is I will keep my glasses on and I'll have my fleece gaiter on, but I'll make sure that I pull my hood up. And around the hood on those parkas is this ruff. And the ruff isn't there just to look pretty. It's also there to cut down on the wind. And when you have your hood up, you actually are a lot more comfortable and you can lower that face covering for a while. So if I notice that my glasses are starting to get a little foggy or frosty, the first thing I do is put my hood up, pull it down, pull my face covering down so I'm exhaling not right into my glasses, and that gives them a break and it lets them defrost. So that is my advice. So some of this can be managed on the ground with behavioral changes like putting our hood up, making sure that we're giving our glasses a break from the warm air coming out of our mouths. But the other things we can manage in advance, like if you are eligible for contact lenses, I strongly advise bringing some with you. If you're, again, one of those people who doesn't like to wear them when you don't have to, this is an occasion to pull out the stops and put in the contacts. Goggles, definitely a must. They will help. It will slow down that frosting process, and it will also give you the opportunity to like have something you can take off that then defrosts before you put them back on. And then, like I said, the behavioral changes that we can manage on the ground, like using our hoods more, using our face coverings less. The only time I've had my glasses on and had them frost completely over was when I was out on a really cold day. I didn't bring my parka with a hood, so I had to keep my face covering up, and it was the only way to keep my face warm. And then my glasses just were they were just completely frozen. But that was on me for not using my hood. We can manage that on the ground for sure. So hope that answers the question, but if not, feel free to write back in and ask for more details.
We thank you for that thorough answer. We appreciate that. So if we're coming in a day early, is there a process for us to pick up our cold weather gear early? And is that going to be at the Fort Garry Hotel?
Absolutely. Yeah. So assuming that you're arriving a day early and then spending that time at the Fort Garry as opposed to, booking a completely separate hotel somewhere else, we are going to meet you at the airport regardless of when you get in. So if you're a day early or 2 days early, we're still going to be there with our driver and with our greeter to meet you. And we have a whole team in place to meet you and get your luggage from the airport to the hotel, and also to make sure that you have the gear that you need for Winnipeg. Usually when people come into Winnipeg a day early and you want to go to the park, you want to go for a walk, you don't need everything that we're about to hand you for Churchill. So generally what happens is that either your driver who's brought you from the airport to the hotel or one of our staff on site at the Fort Garry Hotel will meet you up at the gear room. We'll get you into whatever you need for your time in Winnipeg. And then you just come on back during your regular gear pickup time to pick up the things that you didn't need right away. For example, you might not want or need your snow pants right away because you don't need snow pants a lot of the time in Winnipeg, but you do in Churchill. So we have lots of options, but all of those options allow you to get the gear that you need at your time of arrival.
Great, thank you for that. So there is a train from Winnipeg to Churchill that's supposed to be a wonderful trip. Is that possible to do that and still meet you in Churchill?
So the train from Winnipeg to Churchill is not something we include on our itinerary. I've taken that train many, many, many times, first as a student and then as somebody who worked up in Churchill. I certainly understand what you mean when you say it's supposed to be a really beautiful trip. It really is. It takes quite a long time. So for our 2-hour flight from Winnipeg to Churchill, you're looking at more like a 2-day trip, almost 48 full hours from Winnipeg to Churchill on the train. So that's already a point against for some people, not everybody, but some. And then the train has gotten a lot more reliable as of late, but it has still had over the years a lot of, um, really substantial operational issues. For example, times when the train will go partway and then they say, okay, actually the train can't go any further. And then you just have to go back to Winnipeg. So if you travel with us, we're going to go on that chartered flight. We know that that chartered flight is going to get us there. And I would certainly recommend that train trip to anybody at some point in your life. But for our purposes, we know we can get you there on the flights. That is how we're going to do it.
Great, thank you. So, with all the extra clothing and different items that we're going to get when we're there, do we need to bring an extra bag to carry all those things with, or does Nat have to provide us one?
That's a super question. So we have a lot of things on site to help out with extra gear management. I'll tell you what typically happens is that people come, they get their gear. We make a note written down somewhere that it's good to travel to see us with some extra room in your bag, right? So if you've packed your suitcase and it's full, um, maybe choose a bigger bag to bring with you so you've got a little bit of extra room. But generally, there's also clothing that you don't really want or need in Churchill. Maybe you brought a nice pair of shoes. Maybe you brought a jacket that you're traveling with that you have no need of in Churchill. So we're able to store those extra items in Winnipeg for you until you come back. And then you'll have the room in your bag that was allocated to those items to put that extra gear into. Some of that gear you're going to need to have with you right away. So that parka, for example, you're going to wear onto the plane. It doesn't need to be packed in a bag because it's going to go to Churchill on your body. Same thing with the boots, because when we get to Churchill, we unload the plane right onto the tarmac. That tarmac is exposed to that cold north wind, and it's icy and slippery and covered in snow. So having those boots on is quite critical for arrival in Churchill. So really, the things that need to fit in your bag for the trip are going to be the snow pants, possibly an extra fleece, mittens. The smaller items are all that really need to be able to fit into your bag, plus the snow pants. So we always have some just extra tote bags around. If you feel like you want an extra bag for leaving things behind in Winnipeg, a lot of people have found it really helpful to bring just an extra, really compressible duffel bag to help keep your items separate and to make your organization easier.
Great, thank you so much for tackling that one. So, when we're there to view the Northern Lights, are we going to have to worry about polar bears when we go outside?
So what I always say in Churchill is that you never need to worry about bears, but you do need to be aware that bears exist. And what that means for us is that we're always aware that bears are a possibility. Now that's on like your expedition leader, your guide is going to talk to you about what to expect on any given nights. On the nights where we are far away from town into the forest, we have some locations where we actually have a wildlife monitor there who's present to make sure that we are not negatively interacting with, be it polar bears or wolves or moose or anything else like that. Around town and elsewhere, we just, you're always going to have myself or another staff member outside at the same time you're outside. Part of our job is to make sure you're warm and comfortable, but part of it is also just to be aware of the surroundings. We do not expect to see polar bears in January, February, or March, But like a friend of mine says, there is not a single month of the year where a bear is not spotted somewhere around town. So it's not likely to be where you are, but at some point in February, there's usually a bear spotted. At some point in March, there's usually a bear spotted. And at some point in January, there's usually a bear spotted. So we're just always keeping that in the back of our minds, not to be afraid, just to be aware so that we know that we are living in this space and working in the space that animals use as well, and just to be respectful and aware of their presence too.
So, how late in the year is it likely we'll see an aurora? Is March too late?
March is absolutely not too late. So in Churchill, the beautiful thing is our limiting factors are mostly daylight. So I do guide our summer trips to Churchill. If you come to Churchill in June or July, that is too late, not because there isn't aurora, but because there's too much light all the way through the nighttime. The sun does set, but only just, and it's just there's too much ambient light in the sky to see aurora in the summertime. But January, February, March, the only thing that's going to happen differently in March is that the sun sets a little bit later. So you might be up, we might head out half an hour later to see the lights than we would in January, but the lights themselves are going to be as present as they are in January.
How would a full moon affect the experience?
Yeah, well, that's always a great question about the moon because we run trips all the way through the moon cycle and it does give you a different experience. A lot of the photography that you saw where things were like pretty and well lit in my images were full moon or nearly full moon uh, photos. So what the full moon will give us is actually some amazing foreground, some gorgeous images where everything is better lit. And it also gives us the ability to move around a lot easier at night. For how you're going to view the sky, of course, it's a little bit different. There's a little bit more ambient light, but we are typically able to see the northern lights, you know, at the same time as the moon in the sky. The moonrise and moonset, of course, happen at different times during the lunar cycle. And sometimes we might be out during a full moon before that moon rises or after it sets. And at a new moon, to counter that, photography is a little more challenging. It is more challenging because that ambient light is not there. So I had some images earlier where I said it's really dark because we turned out the lights, but that was also a new moon photo. We just don't have the ability to light the area and take those gorgeous photos at the new moon if you're looking for images of the landscape or images of the foreground. So all this is to say they're just all different. In whether it's full moon or new moon, your eyes will be able to perceive the northern lights in the sky. When it's new moon, you might have an easier time seeing some of the colors because there's less other light interfering with your eyes, but you're going to have a better time taking photographs when it's the full moon. So if you think about kind of how you want to interact with this experience, are you hoping to have great photos come out of it? Are you hoping to just stand there and watch the lights? I think no matter what time you travel at, you're really going to enjoy it. But if you're thinking photography specifically, having a little bit of light in the sky is actually not a bad thing at all.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. Unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for closing comments.
Oh, well, just always a thanks to everybody for coming in today and watching the show. I know that anytime I get to talk about a program, I start getting very excited for it. So looking forward to winter 2025. In the meantime, I'm going to enjoy some nice weather before we're down at -40. But I hope to see some of you there this winter in this amazing year to come.
Eleanor, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. If you're interested in information on how you could travel with NatHab, give us a call at the number on your screen, or you could send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us Monday for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.